You know, there's a saying that the truth always comes out eventually. I just didn't expect it to come out on a Wednesday afternoon while I was buying flowers for my wife's birthday. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 43 years old, and up until about 6 weeks ago, I believed I had a pretty solid marriage. 17 years, 2 kids. A nice house in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, with a backyard big enough for our golden retriever to lose tennis balls in. My wife worked as a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company, which meant she traveled a fair amount. 2. Sometimes 3 nights a week she'd be in Raleigh or Atlanta, or sometimes as far as Miami for conferences. I never questioned it. Why would I? I trusted her completely. I'm a project manager for a mid-size the flowers. Right. So it was a Wednesday, and my wife's birthday was that Saturday. I left work early to swing by this little florist shop on Elm Street because my wife had once mentioned she loved their arrangements. I walked in, and the woman behind the counter recognized me immediately. She smiled and said, "Oh, you must be here for another arrangement. Your wife's boyfriend usually orders the lilies, but I can do something different for you." I just stood there. I think my brain actually short-circuited for about 3 full seconds. I asked her to repeat what she'd just said. She turned pale and started backtracking, saying she must have confused me with someone else. But the damage was done. I calmly asked her what she meant by my wife's boyfriend. She stammered and explained that a man had been coming in every couple of weeks for the past several months, ordering flowers and having them delivered to a room at the Marriott downtown. He always paid cash and mentioned they were for a woman whose description matched my wife exactly. Red hair, green eyes, always dressed sharp. I bought the flowers anyway. Sunflowers, because my wife loved sunflowers. I drove home, put them in a vase on the kitchen counter, and sat down at the table. I didn't yell, I didn't punch a wall, I just sat there and thought. My wife wasn't due home until Friday evening. She was supposedly at a conference in Savannah. I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as always. I could hear background noise, people talking, glasses clinking. She told me she was at a networking dinner and couldn't talk long. I told her I just wanted to hear her voice and that I missed her. She said she missed me too and would be home Friday night. I told her I loved her. She said it back. Then she hung up. The background noise didn't sound like Savannah. It sounded like a restaurant I knew. There's a particular jazz trio that plays at a place called Montague's downtown every Wednesday evening, and I could swear I heard their trumpet player doing his signature riff. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Not yet. Thursday morning I called in sick to work. First time in 3 years. I drove downtown and parked across the street from the Marriott. I brought a thermos of coffee and a sandwich because I figured I might be there a while. At 11:15 in the morning, I watched my wife walk out of the hotel lobby. She was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. Her arm was linked with a man I'd never seen before, tall, gray at the temples, expensive suit. He kissed her on the cheek, and she laughed in a way I hadn't heard in years. They got into a silver Mercedes and drove off. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes after they left. I finished my coffee, I ate my sandwich, and then I started making phone calls. The first call was to my buddy Ray, who worked in IT for the county. I asked him if he could look up a license plate for me. He said he probably shouldn't, but asked me what was going on. I told him I thought my wife was having an affair. He looked up the plate in about 4 minutes. The car belonged to a man named Victor Ashland, age 51, residing in a very expensive neighborhood in South Charlotte. A quick search told me everything else. He was a senior VP at my wife's company. Her direct supervisor's supervisor. Married, 3 kids, active member of his church's men's group. The irony of that last detail was not lost on me. My second call was to a divorce attorney named Sandra Chen. She came highly recommended by a coworker who'd gone through his own mess a few years back. I explained my situation. She told me to gather evidence, keep my mouth shut, and not to move out of the house under any circumstances. She also told me something interesting. In North Carolina, alienation of affection is still a viable lawsuit, meaning I could potentially sue this man for destroying my marriage. I filed that away for later. Over the next 2 weeks, I became the world's most patient man. My wife came and went on her business trips. I smiled, I cooked dinner when she was home, I played with the kids, I walked the dog, and every time she left, I documented everything. I checked our phone records. I found a second phone hidden in her gym bag, one of those prepaid ones you buy at a gas station. I didn't touch it. I just photographed it and put it back. I checked our credit card statements and found charges at restaurants and hotels that didn't match her supposed conference locations. Atlanta conference? The charges were in Charlotte. Miami meeting? She was in Asheville. I organized everything in a spreadsheet. I told you I'm a project manager. Organization is what I do. But here's where it gets interesting. My wife's birthday was coming up, and I had already told her I was planning something special. She seemed excited, which was strange considering she was apparently getting plenty of excitement elsewhere. I decided the birthday party would be my stage. I called my mother-in-law first. I adore that woman. She's 71, sharp as a tack, and doesn't tolerate nonsense from anyone. I told her I was throwing a surprise birthday party for her daughter and invited her and my father-in-law. They were thrilled. Then I called my wife's sister, her best friends, our neighbors, my brother and his wife, even a few of her coworkers. Everyone was invited to our house on Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. I told them to park down the street and come through the back gate. I hired a caterer. I rented a tent for the backyard. I even got a DJ, because my wife always said she wanted to dance at a party in our own backyard. I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. Then I made one more call, to Victor Ashland's wife. I didn't introduce myself at first. I called the main number for their church and asked to speak with someone on the women's ministry team. They connected me to Patricia Ashland, who apparently ran the whole thing. I told her I was organizing a surprise corporate appreciation event for the top executives at the pharmaceutical company, and her husband was being honored. I said spouses were specifically requested to attend. She was delighted. She asked for the date and time. I gave her our address and told her Saturday at 6. She said she'd be there with bells on. Saturday arrived. My wife was getting her hair done, which she said was for a dinner date with me that evening. I told her I had something even better planned, and to wear her favorite dress. She seemed genuinely happy. I almost felt bad. Almost. The caterer set up beautifully. White tablecloths, string lights across the backyard, a full bar, and enough food for 40 people. The DJ was set up near the pool with speakers that could wake the dead. By 5:30, guests started arriving through the back gate. My mother-in-law was the first one there. She hugged me and said I was the best son-in-law a woman could ask for. I told her I appreciated that more than she knew. By 5:50, everyone was in place. 32 people in my backyard, hidden behind the tent and the fence. Patricia Ashland arrived at 5:45 in a stunning blue dress, looking confused but excited. I met her at the back gate and introduced myself as Marcus, the party organizer. I told her that her husband would be arriving shortly with one of his colleagues, and that we wanted to surprise them both. She smiled and said Victor had no idea she was in town, because she told him she was visiting her sister in Wilmington. She laughed about how surprised he'd be. I laughed too, but for very different reasons. At 6:15, I heard my wife's car pull into the driveway. I had texted her to come home because I had a surprise waiting. What I didn't tell her was that Victor was already on his way too. I'd sent him a text from my wife's prepaid phone, the one from the gym bag, telling him to meet her at our address because her husband was away for the weekend and they could finally have the house to themselves. The sheer audacity of that invitation, to bring her lover to our home, to the bed where I sleep, well, I figured if she was going to disrespect our marriage, I might as well set the stage properly. My wife walked through the front door, calling my name. I told her I was in the backyard. She came through the sliding glass doors, and I was standing there alone. The tent blocked her view of the guests. I told her she looked beautiful. She kissed me on the cheek and asked what the surprise was. I said we had to wait for one more person. That's when Victor Ashland walked through the side gate. He was holding a bottle of wine and wearing that smug grin of a man who thinks he's about to have a very good evening. He froze when he saw me. Then he looked at my wife, then back at me. My wife's face went through about 6 different colors in 3 seconds. I've never seen someone cycle through confusion, recognition, horror, and nausea that quickly. I smiled and said, "Welcome, Victor. I'm so glad you could make it. We've been waiting for you." Before either of them could speak, I pulled the cord on the tent flap. It dropped open like a curtain at a theater. 32 people stood there, drinks in hand, staring at my wife and her lover. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law, her sister, her best friends, our neighbors, my brother, his wife, co-workers. And standing right in the front row, in her beautiful blue dress, was Patricia Ashland. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then Patricia said, "Victor, what are you doing here, and why is that woman looking at you like she's seen a ghost?" Victor dropped the wine bottle. It shattered on the patio. Red wine spread across the concrete like a crime scene, which felt oddly appropriate. My wife turned to me and whispered, "How could you do this?" I responded by asking her the same question. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the DJ's speakers. I played a voicemail she'd left on Victor's phone, one I'd recorded off the prepaid weeks earlier, where she told him she couldn't wait to be with him again, and that our marriage was a joke, and I was too stupid to notice anything. Her mother's face went from shock to fury so fast I thought the woman might spontaneously combust. She walked right up to her daughter and said in front of everyone that she didn't raise her to be this kind of woman, and that her father was rolling in the early stages of a heart attack. My father-in-law was sitting in a lawn chair, clutching his chest, though I think it was more from rage than any medical condition. Patricia Ashland, To her enormous credit, didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked over to her husband, took the car keys out of his jacket pocket, and said in the calmest voice I've ever heard that he should find his own way home because she was going to go pack his things. Then she turned to my wife and told her that she could have him, because she certainly didn't want him anymore. She walked out through the back gate without looking back. My wife started crying. Victor started making excuses. I walked over to the bar, poured myself a bourbon, and sat down next to the DJ. I asked him to play something upbeat because we still had a party to throw. He looked at me like I was insane, but he put on some Motown, and after a few minutes people actually started eating. My brother came over and clinked his glass against mine. He said that was the most brutal thing he'd ever witnessed. I told him the potato salad was excellent, and he should try some before it was gone. Victor left about 10 minutes later. Nobody offered him a ride. My wife locked herself in our bedroom. Her mother went up and spent about an hour with her, and I could hear the muffled sounds of a conversation that I'm fairly certain involved a lot of words I won't repeat here. At around 9 o'clock, after the last guests had left and I'd helped the caterer pack up, I sat on the patio with the remains of my bourbon. My wife came outside. Her eyes were swollen and her makeup was ruined. She sat across from me and said we needed to talk. I agreed. She told me I had no right to humiliate her like that. I told her she had no right to sleep with another man in hotel rooms paid for with money she earned while I stayed home with our children. She said it wasn't like that. I asked her what it was like then. She said she had felt neglected and unappreciated for years. I reminded her that I'd cooked dinner every night she was home, drove the kids to every practice and recital, maintained the house, walked the dog, and never once complained about her travel schedule. She started crying again. Then she said the thing they always say. She said if I had paid more attention to her needs, none of this would have happened. I finished my bourbon, stood up, and told her that my attorney would be in touch on Monday. I walked inside, locked the guest bedroom door behind me, and slept better than I had in months. The divorce took 4 months. I got the house, shared custody of the kids, and filed an alienation of affection suit against Victor Ashland that was settled out of court for a figure that let me pay off the mortgage and put money away for the kids' college. My ex-wife moved into an apartment across town. Victor's wife took him to the cleaners in their divorce. Last I heard, he was demoted and transferred to a regional office in Nebraska. My ex-wife's career at the company became significantly less comfortable after Patricia, who apparently had connections to several board members, made a few phone calls. As for me, I still make coffee every morning, I still walk the dog, and I still cook dinner for my kids. The sunflowers on the kitchen counter are ones I buy for myself now. And every time I pass that florist shop on Elm Street, I wave to the woman behind the counter, because if she hadn't accidentally told me the truth, I might still be living a lie. Funny how the smallest moments change everything. All right, that was quite a ride. But hold on, because the next story is just as wild. Stay tuned. People always say I'm the calm one, the steady one, the guy who never raises his voice, never flips a table, never makes a scene. My wife used to tell her friends that nothing rattled me. She called it my superpower. Turns out she was right. My superpower was about to come in very handy. I'm Doug Patterson, 52 years old, retired from the Army after 24 years of service, now working as a safety inspector for the county. My wife and I have been married for 28 years. We raised 3 kids in a brick ranch house on Pinecrest Drive in a quiet suburb outside of Richmond, Virginia. Our youngest left for college last fall, and my wife had been going through what she described as a difficult transition, empty nest syndrome, she called it. I suggested she volunteer at the animal shelter or take a pottery class. Apparently, she found a different kind of hobby. It was a Tuesday morning. I was supposed to be at a job site in Henrico County by 8 o'clock, but when I got to my truck, I realized I'd left my inspection kit on the workbench in the garage. I pulled back into the driveway and walked through the side door. That's when I heard it. Music coming from upstairs. Not just any music. It was that playlist my wife had made for what she called relaxation evenings, the one with the slow R&B and the smooth jazz, at 7:30 in the morning. Then I heard voices. Specifically, I heard my wife's voice saying things I will not fully repeat here. But the general theme was enthusiastic encouragement directed at someone who was definitely not me. She was calling him baby and coach and telling him to keep going. The rhythmic thumping coming from our bedroom ceiling left absolutely nothing to the imagination. I stood in the garage for a moment, holding my inspection kit, listening to my wife of 28 years betray everything we'd built together. My first instinct was to walk upstairs and handle the situation the way the Army taught me to handle threats. But I took a breath, then another. Then I did something that probably saved me from prison. I set down the kit, walked to the kitchen, and put on a pot of coffee. While the coffee brewed, I noticed a few things. There was a gym bag by the front door that wasn't mine. It had a logo on it from CrossFit Revolution, which was the gym my wife had started going to about 5 months ago. Inside the bag was a wallet. The driver's license belonged to a man named Tyler James Brewer, age 31. My wife was 50 years old and sleeping with a 31-year-old CrossFit instructor. I have to admit, in a twisted way, I was almost impressed. I also noticed his car keys. They were attached to one of those fancy keychains from a luxury dealership, BMW. I looked out the window and sure enough, there was a white BMW parked behind my wife's car in the driveway, bold as brass. This man had parked his car in my driveway while sleeping with my wife in my bed on a Tuesday morning. The sheer disrespect was almost artistic. Upstairs, the activities continued. My wife was now providing detailed verbal comparisons between her current experience and her experience with me, and I was not coming out favorably in this review. She told him he was incredible and that I had never made her feel like this. He responded with the kind of grunting and self-congratulatory commentary that suggested he genuinely believed he was God's gift to married women. The coffee finished brewing. I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen table. Then I got to work. First, I called my buddy Steve, who was a sergeant with the Richmond PD. I told him the situation. He was quiet for a long time and then asked me what I needed. I told him I needed him to run the BMW's plates and find out if there was anything interesting. He called me back in 10 minutes. Turns out, young Tyler had 2 outstanding warrants. One for failure to appear on a DUI charge, and another for an unpaid fine related to a hit and run in a parking lot. Steve asked me if I wanted a unit sent over. I told him to give me about 40 minutes. Second, I called the gym where Tyler worked. I asked to speak with the owner. A woman named Diane picked up. I told her I was a concerned citizen and wanted to know if she was aware that one of her trainers was providing private sessions to married clients in their homes while their husbands were at work. There was a very long pause. Then Diane said she was Tyler's wife. Let me tell you, of all the phone calls I made that morning, that one was the most uncomfortable, and also the most productive. Diane was remarkably composed. She asked me for my address. I gave it to her. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes. I told her to park down the street and come to the side door. Third, I called my 3 children, all of them. I told each one that something was happening at home and that I loved them. My oldest, my daughter, asked if everything was okay. I said it would be. My middle son asked if mom was all right. I said she was about to have a very educational morning. The activity upstairs finally stopped around 8:15. I heard the shower turn on. I heard my wife laughing about something. Then I heard her tell Tyler that he needed to leave before I got home from work at 5. She mentioned that I was at a job site all day and that they had plenty of time, but she didn't want to risk it. She said I was completely oblivious and would never suspect anything. At 8:20, Diane walked through my side door. She was a compact, athletic woman with the kind of jaw that suggested she did not suffer fools. She looked around my kitchen, saw the gym bag, and her expression hardened. I offered her coffee. She accepted. We sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee in complete silence while my wife and her husband got dressed upstairs. At 8:30, I heard footsteps on the stairs. My wife came around the corner first, wearing her bathrobe, heading for the kitchen. She saw me and stopped dead. The coffee mug she was carrying slipped from her hand and shattered on the tile floor. Then she saw Diane. Then Tyler came around the corner behind her, still buttoning his shirt, and saw all 3 of us sitting at the kitchen table like we were having a morning meeting. The look on his face. I wish I had a camera. Actually, I did. I'd set up my phone to record on the counter about 20 minutes earlier. Nobody spoke for what felt like an hour, but was probably about 15 seconds. Then my wife said my name, just my name, in a voice that was about 2 octaves higher than normal. I took a sip of my coffee and told her to sit down because we had a few things to discuss. Tyler tried to move toward his gym bag. Diane told him to stay exactly where he was. He froze. There's something about a woman who can deadlift 300 pounds telling you not to move that really commands attention. I pulled out my phone and showed my wife the screen. It was a recording of the audio from upstairs. I didn't need video. The audio was more than enough. Her face went from white to red to a shade of green I'd never seen on a human being before. She asked me how long I'd been home. I told her long enough. Then came the best part. I told Tyler that I had some good news and some bad news. The good news was that he was very popular today. A lot of people wanted to see him. The bad news was that 2 of those people were officers from the Richmond Police Department who were currently parked at the end of our street waiting for my signal because he had outstanding warrants. His face collapsed like a souffle in an earthquake. Diane stood up and walked over to her husband. She was remarkably calm. She told him that she had put everything into that gym. She had taken out the loans, signed the leases, built the client base, and he had been using it as a dating service for bored housewives. She told him not to bother coming home because the locks would be changed by noon and his clothes would be in garbage bags on the porch. My wife started crying and said it wasn't what it looked like. I asked her what exactly it looked like, from my perspective, because from where I was sitting, it looked precisely like what it was. She said it was a mistake and it only happened a few times. Diane let out a sharp laugh and said try 5 months, because she'd been checking Tyler's phone for weeks, and my wife's name came up more than anyone else's. I texted Steve. 2 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. 2 officers walked in and politely asked Tyler to turn around. They cuffed him right there in my kitchen, still in his gym clothes, smelling like my wife's perfume. As they walked him out, one of the officers nodded at me and said, "Sorry about the circumstances, sir." I told him I appreciated their prompt service. After Tyler was gone and Diane had left, it was just me and my wife in the kitchen. The broken coffee mug was still on the floor. She looked at me with tears running down her face and asked me what was going to happen now. I told her that my attorney would contact her attorney and that she might want to start looking for an apartment. She said we could work through this. She said 28 years had to mean something. I told her it meant everything to me, which was exactly why we were having this conversation. She asked why I didn't yell or scream or break things. I told her that I spent 24 years in the Army learning how to stay calm under pressure. This was just another mission. The objective was clear, the intelligence was gathered, and the operation was executed. Mission accomplished. She packed a bag that afternoon and went to stay with her sister. I sat on the back porch that evening with a beer and watched the sun set. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Diane. It said, "Thank you for the coffee, and if I ever needed a free gym membership, I had one for life." I actually laughed out loud. First time in weeks. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I kept the house. The kids were grown, so custody wasn't an issue, but all 3 of them chose to spend their holidays with me. My ex-wife moved to Roanoke and, last I heard, was taking an actual pottery class. Tyler's gym shut down after Diane pulled out. He tried to start a personal training business on his own, but apparently having a DUI conviction and a reputation for sleeping with clients isn't great for business. As for me, I still make my coffee every morning at 6:30. The house is quiet now, but it's a good kind of quiet, the kind where you can hear yourself think. And what I think most mornings, sitting at that kitchen table, is that the best revenge isn't loud, it isn't violent. It's just being the man you always were, steady and calm, while everyone else falls apart around you. All right, that was a good one, but we've got one more story, and trust me, this one has a twist you won't see coming. Let's get into it. I never planned on being a single father, but life doesn't really care about your plans, does it? One Thursday evening, I came home from a 12-hour shift at the plant to find the house empty. Not just quiet. Empty. The closet in our bedroom was half cleared out. The bathroom was missing her things. The kids' overnight bags were gone. There was a note on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet our daughter had made in kindergarten. It said, "I'm sorry, Kyle. I found someone who makes me happy. The kids are safe with me. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Papers are in the drawer. Rachel." I read it 3 times. Then I opened the drawer and found a packet of divorce papers already filled out. She was asking for the house, the car, alimony, full custody, and for me to agree to let her new partner adopt our 2 children. Our son was 9 and our daughter was 7. I called her. She picked up immediately, almost like she'd been waiting. She told me she'd met someone, a man named Grant Holloway, who owned a real estate development company in our town. She said she'd been unhappy for years and that Grant made her feel alive again. I asked her when this started. She hesitated and then admitted it had been going on for about a year. A year. 12 months of lies and smiles and have a good day at work, honey, while she was building a whole nother life behind my back. I asked about the adoption papers. She said Grant wanted to be a real father figure to the kids. I told her that they already had a real father and that I would eat those papers before I signed them. She sighed and said she hoped I wouldn't be difficult about this. After I hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time. Then I called my older brother, Ted, who lived about an hour away. He drove down that night, and we sat on the porch drinking beer until 2 in the morning. Ted told me to sign the divorce papers if that's what she wanted, but to fight like hell for the kids and never ever sign those adoption papers. He also told me something I didn't know. Ted worked in commercial construction, and he knew Grant Holloway by reputation. According to Ted, Grant had a habit of underbidding contracts, cutting corners, and using substandard materials. 2 of his projects had already been flagged by county inspectors, and there were rumors of an ongoing investigation. I filed that information away. Then I called a lawyer. The divorce process was brutal. My wife had Grant's money behind her, and they hired an aggressive attorney who tried to paint me as an absent father who worked too much. The irony of being called absent by the woman who literally abandoned the house was not lost on me. But I kept my cool. I documented everything. I showed up to every hearing, every mediation session, every court date. I wore a clean shirt and spoke respectfully. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, seemed to see right through my wife's narrative. In the end, I lost the house but got shared custody with generous weekends and holidays. I found an apartment 2 miles away so the kids could stay in the same school. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The adoption papers were thrown out when my attorney argued that stripping a fit parent of their rights to appease a new boyfriend was not in the best interests of the children. The judge agreed. My wife married Grant 4 months after the divorce was finalized. They moved into a big house on the nice side of town. My kids came home from their first weekend there, and my daughter told me that Grant had a swimming pool and a movie room. My son said Grant was okay, but he wasn't as funny as me. I hugged them both a little tighter than usual that night. Life went on. I worked my shifts at the plant. I coached my son's baseball team. I helped my daughter with her science projects. I ate a lot of frozen dinners and learned to do laundry without turning everything pink, though it took a few tries. About a year after the divorce, the news broke. Grant Holloway's company was under investigation by the State Attorney General's office. Substandard materials, falsified inspection reports, and a kickback scheme with a corrupt county official. It was all over the local news. Grant was arrested on a Wednesday morning. The footage of him being walked out of his office in handcuffs made the front page of the paper. My wife's face in the background of that photo was something I'll never forget. She looked like someone who had just realized the lifeboat she'd jumped to was sinking faster than the ship she'd left. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call her to say I told you so. I just cut out the newspaper article and put it in a drawer. Not sure why. Maybe as a reminder that shortcuts don't pay. The fallout was significant. Grant's assets were frozen pending the investigation. The big house went into foreclosure because it turned out Grant had leveraged everything against his business. My wife called me for the first time in months, asking if the kids could stay with me for a few extra weeks while she figured out her living situation. I said of course. Those few weeks turned into a few months. During that time, something unexpected happened. There was a woman who worked at the front desk of the rec center where I coached baseball. Her name was Laura. She was quiet, a little shy, with short brown hair and glasses that were always slightly crooked. She'd lost her husband to cancer 2 years earlier and was raising her son alone. We'd exchanged pleasantries for months, but one evening after practice, she asked me if I wanted to grab a coffee. I said sure. That coffee turned into dinner the following week. Dinner turned into weekends at the park with all 3 kids. Laura's son was the same age as mine, and they became fast friends. Laura was kind, honest, and laughed at my terrible jokes. She didn't care that I lived in a small apartment or drove a 10-year-old truck. She cared that I showed up, that I was present. My ex-wife noticed, of course. The kids talked about Laura. One afternoon when she picked them up, my wife commented that I seemed to have moved on quickly. I told her that 1.5 years wasn't exactly quickly, and that she'd moved on while we were still married, so perhaps she wasn't the best judge of timing. She didn't have a response for that. Grant's trial lasted 3 weeks. He was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. My wife was not charged with anything, but she was left with nothing. No house, no savings, no husband. She moved back in with her parents, who lived in a small ranch house on the other side of town. The woman who'd left me for a life of luxury was now sleeping in her childhood bedroom at age 39. I wish I could say I felt nothing, but that wouldn't be true. I felt something. Not satisfaction, exactly. More like a quiet confirmation that the world, eventually, gets things right. 2 years after our first coffee, Laura and I got married. Small ceremony in the backyard of the house I'd saved up to buy. A modest 3-bedroom with a big oak tree and enough room for a dog. My kids were in the wedding party. My son was the ring bearer, and my daughter was the flower girl. Laura's son stood next to his mom and held her hand the whole time. My brother Ted was my best man and gave a toast that made everyone cry, including me. My ex-wife found out through the kids as usual. According to my daughter, her reaction was to say nothing and go to her room. I don't know what she felt, and honestly, it wasn't my concern anymore. Years passed. Grant got out of prison and, to his credit, didn't try to reconnect with my ex-wife. He moved to another state and disappeared from our lives. My ex-wife eventually got a job at a doctor's office and started rebuilding. We developed something resembling a civil relationship for the sake of the kids. We could stand in the same room at school events without the temperature dropping. The real moment came at my son's high school graduation. My ex-wife was there. Laura was there. The kids were there. After the ceremony, my son hugged me and said, "Thanks for never giving up on us, Dad." My daughter took a photo of me and Laura together, and later that night she texted it to me with a message that said, "You guys look really happy." I showed it to Laura and she smiled and said, "That's because we are." I still think about that note on the refrigerator sometimes. The one that said, "Please don't make this harder than it has to be." She was right about one thing. It didn't have to be hard. The hard part was the year of lying. The hard part was the empty house and the adoption papers and the nights alone in a quiet apartment wondering what I did wrong. Everything after that was just putting one foot in front of the other. And eventually, those steps led me somewhere better than where I started. Funny how that works.